Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, today I want to talk about 5 times in the story in which Luffy probably should have died. But anyway, as some of you guys will know, this is my second time uploading this video. The first one had a few mistakes which I would like to fix. But I want you to keep in mind that this video isn't to be taken 100% seriously. This video is made for fun. In no way am I upset about anything that I'm going to say here. And so I tried to rationalize all of the instances in which Luffy could have died, and sort of chose the ones that I thought were less reasonable. So for instance, yeah, Magellan poisoned Luffy, and yes, that was going to kill him. And yes, it was very fortunate that Ivankov happened to be in Impel Down and they happened to find him, and he happened to have the correct Double Fruit ability to cure Luffy. But still, I find it reasonable to randomly meet someone with the powers to save you. Sometimes you do get lucky, and so other people might combo this, well, with Dragon happened to be there to save Luffy, and Shanks happened to intervene in the war, dealt with Kaido somehow, and save Luffy. So these, I guess, make less sense as you add more instances of crazy luck, but I'm looking at particular instances by themselves. I'm also ignoring instances where a character's actions make sense. So for instance, Aokiji definitely could have killed Luffy before the Water 7 arc, but as Oda later went on to explain his character, explain his motives and his conflicts, it made sense to me. And lastly, I am ignoring any time Luffy displayed some sort of power-up. Oda does not give Luffy a lot of power-ups, a lot of transformations and things of that nature, so I'm going to cut him some slack when he gives Luffy the power-up that he needs at the absolute correct time. So yeah, back in Marineford, Dracula Mihawk probably should have cut off Luffy's arms, he bled out and he should have died right then and there, but Luffy awakened some sort of observation hockey-like ability, and that's just how it is. But anyway, let's get on to the list, but before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know that I opened up a Teespring where you can purchase t-shirts with my logo on it. I had several people ask me about this. They wanted me to make this available, so for those 10 people out there that are interested in this, it's going to be available for a few days and probably not exist for a very long time afterwards. But yeah, if you want to rep Joyboy, or rep your inner weeaboo, your One Piece theorist inside of you that nobody else will know of except for other people who watch my channel, feel free to click the link in the description. But yeah, let's start off with number 5. And we're doing this first because I talked about it recently. It was the reason why I made this video. I was inspired by my own comments. But back in the Thriller Bark arc, where Luffy and crew were going off against Moria, Luffy definitely should have died. So again, we're ignoring transformations here. So yes, it was super convenient that Lola and her crew happened to be collecting shadows from Moria. In fact, running around on Moria's own ship, his own island. Of course, it's kind of explained that Moria was way too lazy to deal with any problems that might be on his island. All the people that he had taken the shadows from, he literally didn't give... He gave 2 shits less about. So that's how they were able to do that, and we just have to accept that. And Luffy absorbed those shadows, became Nightmare Luffy, and without this major power-up, the Strats probably wouldn't have been able to defeat Oars. But of course, we gotta keep in mind that if Luffy actually died, then Oars would have lost Luffy's shadow. So Moria didn't actually want to kill Luffy at this exact moment. What I'm actually referring to is at the very end of the arc, where the Thriller Bark happened to leave the Florian Triangle, which was forever shrouded in mist. And so, as we should know, those whose shadows are taken cannot be exposed to sunlight, or they just disappear. And so the fight up until this point was pretty epic. They did manage to defeat Oars, but Nightmare Luffy's powers ran out. And as the sun started rising up over the horizon, they only had a few moments left to live, and Moria was still conscious. In fact, Moria said himself that even if he were defeated, the shadows of these zombies do not return to their owners, that whether he's conscious or not, it doesn't matter, that essentially the Strats at this point were screwed. With the sun coming out, their shadows would not return to them unless Moria specifically gave them back. But as it turned out, there was another way. Other than Moria specifically giving back somebody their shadows, it was also possible if he disconnected the shadows from the zombie and absorbed them into his own body. If he were defeated, then the shadows would return to their owners. And this is precisely what occurred. When the Straw Hats and Luffy only had a few moments left before they would disappear from the world completely, Moria disconnected the shadows from all the zombies on Thriller Bark. In fact, to make a point that he was superior to Luffy, Luffy had absorbed 100 shadows. Moria said, I can absorb 1,000. And so it seems like 2 things occurred here simultaneously. Number 1, Moria gave the Strats a chance to receive their shadows back. And number 2, Moria, being the idiot that he is, consumed way too many shadows, more than he could possibly hold, and actually made himself easier to defeat. If Moria had just consumed just a few shadows, I have little doubt that Moria would have been able to beat Luffy and everyone. And he certainly wouldn't have lost in just a few minutes, but as it stands, that is exactly what happened. Luffy was able to defeat Moria, everyone got their shadows back at the very nick of time, and I gotta say here, Luffy probably should have died. And so this moves us into number 4, and so my previous number 4 has now been deleted because of my own stupidity. But this actually is a great opportunity for me to include something that I didn't include in the last video. And so in the Little Garden arc, there was a pretty dire situation in which most of the Straw Hats looked like that they were going to die by being covered in candle wax. And it was the task of Luffy, Usopp, and Karoo to save them. And so the obstacle preventing Luffy from saving everyone was Miss Goldenweek. Now, if you don't remember, Miss Goldenweek's Devil Fruit, she essentially could paint things, and they could influence someone's emotions. So it's kind of like hypnosis. So Miss Goldenweek painted stuff that forced Luffy to laugh, forced Luffy to have a tea party, and essentially forced him to do anything other than save his friends. Her Devil Fruit is ridiculously overpowered. Now, we don't know if it's completely ineffective against people that aren't of simple mind like Luffy, but I would imagine, given that she uses the technique, that it often works. But anyway, Luffy is completely under her spell, and that is when Usopp arrives. Usopp, the mighty fighter that he was chased simultaneously by Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, but still managed to get an attack off and it hit Luffy, destroying his shirt and freeing him from Miss Goldenweek's spell. But I find it really odd that Miss Goldenweek never once tried to use any of her abilities on Usopp whatsoever. Which is probably the problem. I think Miss Goldenweek was far too overpowered in hacks for this arc, for this situation, and I'm not sure if Oda really wanted to deal with her. So what he did instead was, for the most part, ignore her from the rest of this fight. It then became a battle royale with Mr. 3 using his powers and Luffy, and all Miss Goldenweek did from this point was power up Mr. 3. The only explanations we got for this is, one, Luffy said that her powers were no longer going to work on him, that he wanted to save his friends way too much, and then later she specifically told Mr. 3 that if she painted some upgrade on him, that maybe she could take a rest now. Yeah, that's why she didn't use her abilities for the rest of this arc, but if she had, I'm almost certain that everyone would have died. But now let's talk about number 3, and Luffy versus Crocodile. And so I can forgive a villain being cliche and not double tapping, not finishing off their opponent because they're overconfident bastards one time, but not twice. And so when Luffy first encountered Crocodile, he was in way over his head, had very little chance of beating him, and in fact acquired the tools to be able to beat Crocodile in this fight. He was certainly fortunate to have survived. It's very convenient that Robin happened to show up to dig him out of the sand. It's also really fortunate that Luffy wasn't completely buried by the sand and that his injuries inflicted by Crocodile didn't kill him, and that Crocodile didn't inflict more injuries to be sure of Luffy's death. But I don't really think that Luffy should have died here. But I don't think that this is the case with the second fight. And so in retrospect, you go ahead and read this. It's kind of hilarious. But yeah, again, Luffy, even as Mizu, Luffy lost to Crocodile, and Crocodile ended up sapping all of the liquid out of his body. And then Crocodile, even after Luffy had essentially come back from the death in the previous fight, says this: "Sorry, but I'm in a hurry." Bruh, come on now. Come on, really? Really? Can't even take 5 seconds to finish the job, really? Come on, really? But that isn't even the best part. So shortly before Luffy had all of the liquid drained out of his body, he shot 2 bubbles or 2 blasts of water, I guess, into the air at Crocodile, which Crocodile dodged. Crocodile then says his little spiel and throws Luffy off of the edge of the building. The 2 water droplets that Luffy had actually sent and aimed at Crocodile then came down from the sky directly into Luffy's mouth, after Crocodile had randomly thrown him onto the ground. Thus, with minutes left to live, nobody there to save him, and the only source of water being the source that he shot up randomly into the sky, Luffy was rejuvenated and Crocodile had already left. But anyway guys, yeah, pretty sure Luffy should have died there. Now let's move on to number 2. And so Luffy had a pretty epic fight versus Doflamingo in Dressrosa, a fight which took Luffy several days to recover from. And so he was in fact responsible for saving the island of Dressrosa. And so if Fujitora had decided to forgive Luffy, or decided that Luffy was not his enemy, that he was actually a hero, then it would have made sense to me. Fujitora seems like a pretty alright guy. But that wasn't really Fujitora's perspective. Fujitora, still as an admiral of the Marines and the world government, views Luffy, the pirate, as somebody who needs to be captured, arrested, and imprisoned. But he certainly seemed a bit conflicted about what to do, so rather than make a choice, he left it up to chance. He rolled a dice for 3 consecutive days. If the dice happened to land on the number 1, then Luffy was spared. If it landed on any other number, then Fujitora would attempt to capture Luffy. And I do believe that he would have done so successfully before Luffy had recovered. A lot of people don't like the idea that Luffy is the chosen one, but he has the luck of the chosen one, because for 2 straight days, what did Fujitora roll? He rolled the number 1. Often in manga and anime, villains talk about probability of escape or probability of winning. Your chance is less than 1%, or whatever. But in this case, there's actual like statistical things that we can look at to determine what the probability was that Luffy would get out of that situation. So it's not just some arbitrarily made up number where the villain doesn't understand the circumstances. No, the circumstances are as straightforward as it could possibly be. You have 1 good option out of 6 total choices, which is about 16% chance or 17% chance of hitting the number that you want. You do that twice in a row, and the probability of this occurring is about 2.7%. Luffy literally had a 2.7% chance of having Fujitora ignore him for 2 days in order for him to recuperate. 2.7%, as in if there were 100 separate universes in which Fujitora rolled dice in all of them, there would only be 2.7 or 3 of them in which Luffy actually would have made it off for 2 days. Maybe this is ticky-tacky, maybe not, but I think the fact that we actually have the legit percentage makes this feel a lot less legit. In the vast majority of possible universes, Luffy in this case probably would have died, or I guess gotten captured. But this finally leads us into number 1, and this might be the most egregious instance in the series that honestly makes no sense. I did get an explanation after I uploaded my first video that was actually pretty alright, but still I would have expected Oda to address this specifically, but he really didn't. And so here's what you need to know. Enel consumed the lightning Logia Devil Fruit. He was lightning itself. And it was very fortunate for sure that Luffy happened to be made of rubber, which does not conduct electricity, so lightning attacks were not effective on Luffy. But that wasn't the only weapon that Enel had. Enel also had the ability to essentially heat things up with his electricity, such that he could turn his gold trident searing hot, so that not only could it stab Luffy, but it would simultaneously burn him. And then in addition to this, Enel had the ability of mantra, which is another word for observation haki. And so the only way that Luffy conceived to counter this was essentially attack randomly and not actually think about where he was aiming. By doing this, Enel's observation haki or mantra didn't work, and Luffy was actually able to hit him. But this required specific circumstances in which Enel essentially allowed Luffy the possibility of being close enough to hit him. So yeah, Luffy may have been made out of rubber, he may have been able to do damage to a Logia user, he may have been immune to Enel's most powerful abilities. But I don't think that excuses how Luffy was actually able to defeat him. Luffy defeated Enel, the lightning Logia Devil Fruit user, lightning being really freaking fast, with speed. Luffy got a damn speed boost by a waiver. He had a fucking giant golden ball on his arm. And even still, he was so fast that Enel, even with mantra, even with observation haki, even predicting where Luffy would attack, couldn't dodge it. And he even did this while in his strongest form, the Raijin. I don't know where you guys stand, but for me, Oda, I'm sorry, but no. Just no. However, the explanation that I got from the comment section suggested that Enel actually cared a lot about the Arc Maxim and couldn't dodge it because if he had done that, then Luffy would have destroyed it. This makes a ton of sense to me. But I would have expected, if this were to be true, Oda to specifically address this by having Enel saying or thinking, oh no, I can't let Luffy destroy the Arc Maxim. Its absence for me is very conspicuous to whether or not Oda was actually considering that when he drew this scene. But it wouldn't surprise me too much if he did. And to make things even more interesting is after being defeated by Luffy, Enel decided that, hey, I can't beat this guy, might as well move on to the moon. But guys, I want to make it known that I don't have a problem with any of these instances, or any that I potentially may have missed that you guys can come up with in the comment section. It's just One Piece. Despite what people may want, Luffy gets really lucky. Lots and lots of fortunate things happen. And sometimes these things make less sense than other times. But I just thought this would be a fun video to make, 5 times where maybe Luffy should probably died. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to check out links for Discord as well as Patreon in the description. Huge thanks to all of my Patreons. Subscribe if you haven't, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.